mechanic is somebody who can fix something. An auto mechanic fixes a car, a body mechanic is a professional killer. I'm a card mechanic, I can fix a card game.
Ace of cards, Richard Turner.
He can do things with cards no one else can do. He's a trickster.
He is demonstrating the moves used by cheaters, the most difficult things you can do with a deck of cards.
I represent why you should never play cards with strangers.
When I saw Richard Turner perform, I was in the presence of greatness.
About halfway through the show, you can see different members of the audience realize it. This guy can't see.
It was 1963. I was told you will eventually lose all your sight.
He had an eye disease, something they can't do anything about.
I was very mad, and a little bit of rebellion was starting to fester.
Part of his lifestyle was being not blind.
He did not want to be treated any differently.
He actually did stuff that he really shouldn't have done.
You're legally blind. Well, how could you possibly fight?
I don't know, find out.
Don't tell him he can't do something.
He's on the crazy end of obsessive compulsive.
He never puts the cards down.
He never takes a break.
He makes that little sound all the time.
Turner is also legally blind.
Tell them about your eyesight.
People have introduced me saying, oh, by the way, he's blind. What does that have to do with anything? I'm just Richard Turner. You can just introduce me as that.
The statement that can be made about magic is that there aren't as many limits as we generally think.
Don't let anyone tell you that it's impossible. I want to be known for what I do on its own merit because I don't consider myself disabled. My name is Richard Turner. I make my living demonstrating secret gambling moves used by the old riverboat gamblers to take your money when you play cards. In other words, I represent why you should never play cards with strangers. I've had the privilege of entertaining people in over 200 countries to over 1 billion people, which is kind of creepy in a way. That many people have seen your ugly old mug. I hold a 6th-degree black belt in the martial arts. I started training 51 years ago. And I love kids. I've been to Spain. I heard someone is there from Spain. And so anyway, let's have fun. You're welcome to ask whatever. I have nothing to hide. I was just going to do a fancy cut for you. Here's a fancy way of shuffling cards. Was I high enough to see it?
That was great. We could see it.
Okay. And when you do that, when you play cards, people get nervous and they don't want to play with you anymore. They say, this guy might know a thing or two, and I'm not going to play. I'm keeping my allowance to myself.
Isn't that the truth? We have a lot of kids here are studying math. And can you talk a little bit about, is math now, one of the kids emailed and they wanted to know, is math an important skill to have in your trade?
There are what are called mathematical card tricks. And again, to define a little bit more specific, I'm what's called a card mechanic. And that term goes back about 150 years. And what it means is somebody who can fix a card game. So I don't cheat people, but I demonstrate how the old gamblers used to cheat people. And those skills are based on manipulation more than on the math of the game. Now, card counting, that is the skill of playing blackjack. You follow the cards as they come out of the deck, and that gives you information to know what's remaining in the deck, and then that will tell you when to raise or lower your bet. But that's that in that case, math is very important. And of course, I know how to card count as well. In fact, I'm a card counter's nightmare, because when a card counter sits down to me, who can deal any card anywhere from any place at any time, even when someone else does the shuffling, In other words, I can win or lose at will, and they get up and run. I was actually on a TV show where there was a movie called 21 about the MIT students that took on the casinos. And I was on a show where a world famous card counter was going to try to beat the house. And what he didn't know is they brought me in as the dealer for that segment. And we filmed for 2 hours and he never won one hand. And he was a little upset until the director finally said, okay, Mr. Turner, break loose, which was my clue to let him know the whole thing was a sting. So math is very important. And there are things that I do with the cards, like I will have someone pick a card. They say they choose sevens. And I'll ask them, how many players do they want? They might choose 5. I'll say, where do you want to sit? They might choose 3. I'll give the deck 3 shuffles. And I will give the deck to the player and say, deal them out. And the 3rd, 8th, 13th, and 18th card off the deck will be a 7. So the 4 7s fell to the 3rd player at a 5-player table. Now I have to know the math to know where they need to go, but it's the touch with the fingers that gets them there. And the touch meaning my fingers are feeling exact number of cards from each thumb as they interlace from each other. And each thumb has to be able to discern an exact number of cards. And each of those numbers during each shuffle, the number of cards changes. And then if they change the statistic, the request from say 6 players 4th position, all those numbers change. Then they go to the 4th, 9th, 14th, 19th, no, 4th, 9th, anyway, 4th, 10th, 20th, 16th, 22nd position in the deck, I believe. Anyway, so math is important, but math is not really crucial to my particular skill set.
Some of the kids, we've had a couple of questions regarding overcoming adversity because they know a bit about your background and your bio. And so those of you who might not know, he is blind and he's one of the world's greatest card mechanics. Can I list some of the other accomplishments that you've had?
You can say whatever you like there, Ralph.
6th degree black belt in karate. He knows how to trapeze. Those of you who know about the circus, he can walk a tightrope and he knows how to take high falls. It's like stuntman stuff. And you accomplished this with being blind. Would you be able to talk to the kids a little bit about persevering through adversity and the importance of dreaming?
Yeah, and that was my challenge as a kid. I started losing my sight when I was 9. And at first I was rebellious and I did some stupid things. Then it turns out the loss of vision turned out to be one of my greatest assets, because what happened is my haptic and tactile neural network, that's the part of the brain that relates to touch, and it bullied its way into my visual network. And those 2 parts of the brain have come together and have given me a touch that, as other people have said, nobody on the planet has the touch that I have. And I can do things with cards that no one else can do. So what at first looked like a disability turned out to be a very positive thing. But once again, I took that disability, instead of crying about it and whining about it, I used it to develop my other senses, as I said, in this case, my sense of touch. And with that and from that, developed and accomplished things that I never dreamed that I would have had the opportunity to do. And like I said, I've been all over the world and I've entertained some of the most amazing people on the planet. In fact, during COVID, September, I spent all of September in Moscow, Russia. They wanted me on a show called Superhuman Incredible People. And let me turn my phone off. My phone started talking. They wanted me on a show called Superhuman Incredible People. Nice name for a show, huh? Anyway, and the borders to Russia are closed. So it was the deputy prime minister of Russia that literally escorted me into Moscow to do the series. Hold it. Now the people that were trying to help me set up are calling. Sorry about that. Anyway, so once again, we all have obstacles to deal with. Every one of us. It might be the fact that we can't see. We might have a hard time hearing. I think one of the hardest things for people to overcome is what I call laziness or procrastination. People that put things off to another date or a time. So whatever it is, we either use it as motivation, as an adventure. I always tell people, look at every situation like an adventure. Who wants to read a book or watch a movie where all it goes is from win to win to win? He wins this competition. He wins that one. He wins the Olympics. He wins, and on and on. That would be boring. And the same with books. We don't watch or read books that don't have ups and downs. We don't like movies that don't have ups and downs. So I tell people, look at every situation as an adventure, and it might be a tough adventure. You may have, I had a friend that lost his foot to a disease, and that was a trying time for him, but it became an adventure. And now we laugh at each other. I call him Peg-Leg, and he calls me the blind bat. So once again, look at any situation, any obstacle, any challenge in your life as an adventure.
That is wonderful advice. And Richard, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to us today. And we know it's pretty late where some of our European students are at. So what kind of things do you have on the horizon that you're working on?
Well, most of the kids out there probably have an iPhone, and probably most of them know Siri, S-I-R-I. The guy that invented Siri is my business partner. His name is Adam Chyer, C-H-E-Y-E-R. And we have a new tech company where some of my intellectual properties, my games, and other things that I've created are going to be apps that you'll be able to play on your different mobile devices. That's one thing that's in the horizon. I will be opening in London next year at one of the biggest theaters there. And then they also want me in Australia and in New Zealand. And of course, with COVID right now, a lot of the different plans are kind of tentative. And then they want to turn my life. There was a movie out there, a feature documentary called Dealt, D-E-A-L-T. And you can find it on Hulu or Amazon Prime or any of those video on demand platforms. And they want to turn it into a feature motion picture. And so I actually have a meeting with my producer at 4 this afternoon. So that's kind of a cool thing. And the different actors that are looking at playing me are pretty amazing actors. So we'll see what happens there. So that's a cool thing for the year 2022. And but other than that, I enjoy my family, my wife. I have a wonderful son who's he's a tech. He codes for virtual reality, and he's actually one of our business founders of this new tech company. I didn't realize how smart my son was until he and Adam Chyer, they start talking together, and my wife and I go, wow, our son is really smart. And he was so smart that I wasn't smart enough to realize how smart he was, because I was not able to speak his computer languages. And so anyway, that's the coolest thing for me as a senior citizen, to be in business with my 26-year-old son. And then my wife, she runs the city we live in. And so that's very cool. And fortunately, she's the boss of the city. So she was able to rush home and hook us up. And that's why we had this opportunity together. So that's wonderful. Kind of in a nutshell, some of the things I have going on. And there's more than that, but I don't want to bore you with too many things.
You are fine. We have one final student question. Is that okay?
Oh, happy to take it all the time you like. You bet.
Okay. Emma, you should be able to unmute. You had a pretty good question.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, Emma.
Hello. I want to ask you, what was the hardest trick you've ever done with the cards?
One of the hardest things I do is I will make somebody win under these conditions. I'll tell them to name the poker game. Let's say they choose 7-card stud, or we'll say Texas Hold'em. I'll ask them how many players they want. I'll ask them where do they want to sit. I will give them the deck and have them shuffle up and just put a pile of cards in my hand. And every time I go around the table, I will have them shuffle the cards up again and just hand me a random stack of cards. And whatever the hand that they picked will have that winning hand under those conditions. And I had a mentor named Di Vernon. He was the best with the cards for the 20th century. And I had the privilege of working with him for 17 years. He was born in 1894 and he lived to be 98 years old. And what I do there, he said originally was impossible to do. And so I like to say, when someone tells you something's impossible, have a healthy disregard for that. Take possible out of impossible. Take possible out of impossible.